Welcome to the Primo's Musings podcast.
Hi, good evening, Dan. How are you?
Good evening. I'm great. How are you today?
All right, we're going to go from the torrential downpour we played golf in and to the beautiful green grass of Wimbledon, which is the third major of the Grand Slam, four Grand Slams that we have. So I think we're really excited to it. Let me set the stage. One thing which really surprised me going in, let's start with like Carlos Alcaraz is the defending champion who beat Djokovic. And talking about Djokovic, no one thought where we would be here. I mean, it's only like 4 weeks since Djokovic had knee surgery, and he's actually right now confirmed to play. And I think at this point he is if I'm not mistaken, he's the uh, he's a two seed, and I think I think it's a two seed, but let's see later.
Yes,
But
correct. He is the 2 seed. Yes.
yeah, and then I think Medvedev is the
Medvedev must be. Oh, I think Zverev must be number 4.
four
Zverev
seed. Yes, yes, and then Sinner is the
center 1 and Alcaraz 3. Yeah.
three. Yeah, so that's where we are, and then I both of us definitely have our brackets ready. So let's start off with we talked about this. We know who won the first two majors, and then the Australian and the French, and then we go to Wimbledon. Will it be a repeat champion from this year's Grand Slam, or would it be somebody else? So we had Sinner and Alcaraz, who won the first two majors, and then we'll get down to the Wimbledon right now. So let's start off with who your top three or four players who could win the tournament, and then we can get down to. I think maybe we can start with the quarterfinals. Who are our top 8 quarterfinalists and the semifinalists, and then we can pick the winners soon.
All right, that sounds good. So I think, like you said, speaking about the first two tournaments of the season, though, or at least going into the French Open, the big question mark was, well, there were so many question marks about all the top players. You know, Sinner had the hip injury, Alcaraz had the forearm injury, Djokovic had been playing poorly all season, and I think Medvedev was a little banged up as well. So we had question marks, but those guys all played really well. I mean, Djokovic, he advanced, so he had to, I think, default in the quarterfinals, if I'm not mistaken. Was it there? Maybe it was the semi, but he, with the injury, and then obviously we had Alcaraz, Sinner, who both reached the semifinals, and then Alcaraz in a great match over Zverev. So we saw that basically all those. Even though we thought there were injuries were going to be an issue, all those guys were all ready. They were just kind of, I think, pacing themselves, so to speak, for the Grand Slams, and they brought their best and had their physical best and brought their best in the French Open. So that was obviously quite impressive. So all those questions were answered. Now we're on to Wimbledon. It's a real short grass season, as we've heard this. We've been listening. You and me both listen to the Roddick podcast. They've said how they have like 7 or 8 tune-up events for clay. It's crazy how many they have. Whereas they go right from French, basically Memorial Day weekend it finishes, and then they have like 3-4 weeks tops to get ready for Wimbledon, which is kind of the most prestigious, biggest tournament. Yet most of these players, they say, don't really have much grass. They don't get much grass experience. They don't grow up playing on grass. They either grow up playing on clay courts or hard courts here in the U.S. So even though it's the most prestigious tournament, still these players don't get much experience playing on grass. So, anyways, on to we can move on to our picks. Moving on. We'll go right away to the quarterfinals. That's fine with me. We'll start with the Sinner, we'll call the Sinner Alcaraz half of the draw. I have a Sinner, no surprise here, just basically chalk. I have Sinner and Medvedev, although I wouldn't be surprised if it's Dimitrov. Dimitrov's been tough the last year, getting through to a bunch of quarterfinals. Tough player, proven top 10 player at this point. So, but I am going to stick with Sinner Medvedev as my matchup there. And then the other quarterfinal, it looks like I have Alcaraz and Tommy Paul. Tommy Paul, I think, won one of the tune-ups about a week or two ago at Queens Club or Birmingham, one of the grass club precursors to Wimbledon. And he's been playing well. And the knock on him was always just whether he had the desire, the will, the willingness to put in the work that it requires to become a top 10 player. And I think the answer now is yes. We've seen him putting in the work. He's playing at a top level, and he's playing well on grass. Obviously, he won one of the tune-ups, and he's the top American. Arguably the top American. I think. Well, I guess by ranking, he is the top American. I think right now over Fritz by seed at least. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, I think Tommy Paul, you're right. So let's go to your other bracket right now, which we call it the Zverev and Djokovic bracket.
Yep. So yeah, over there. So let's see what I've got here. I've got. It was interesting. So yeah, I have. We're going with the Korda family here. So we're gonna go on that top in the quarterfinal, the top half. I have Korda in an mild upset over Rublev. Rublev he's been to a bunch of quarterfinals, still not to a semifinal ever at a major, and but I have him going down in the fourth round here. I think Korda obviously I think this might be the tournament where he breaks out. I don't think Korda's reached the quarterfinal yet. He's got to the third and fourth round, I think, multiple times in Grand Slams. But I see this as the tournament where possibly we see him advancing to the quarterfinal. And then I have, to no one's real surprise, I have Fritz, Taylor Fritz in the lower half of that quarter. So, and I have Fritz over Zverev in that fourth round matchup. So that'll be a Korda Fritz quarterfinal on the top.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean Fritz is. I think he's probably one of the better grass court players out there. He can serve and volley. He's got an amazing serve. He's got I think the ground's got good movement on the court. He's got the ground strokes where he can kind of shorten that swing, I think, if he needs to, whereas a lot of the clay courters take the big, huge top spin swings, and that doesn't work on grass. You got to really shorten that swing and in order to play well on the grass surface. You can't be taking the big swings like a Casper Ruud or something. So we have Korda Fritz in that quarterfinal, and then to complete the quarterfinals, it was a toss-up between Hurkacz and Dimenauer, the Australian. So I'm going to go with Hurkacz because of his big serve. I think Hubie's gonna be there in the quarterfinal, and I got to go with Djokovic. We have no idea what to expect from him. He could go out in the first round, second round. We just don't know. But I think, like they mentioned in the Roddick podcast too, Joker he's obviously the greatest player ever, the greatest player on grass, arguably. And so few of the players in this draw just know how to play on grass and know how to play well on grass. And he knows how to shorten the points. He knows how to, strategize properly on grass. He's so experienced. And I think just his gamesmanship and his experience will be so huge in getting him to advance to at least the quarterfinals, even though he hasn't played really one competitive match since having surgery about 5 weeks ago. So yeah, so we have Korda Fritz on the top and Hubie and Joker on the bottom for those quarterfinals. So let's go to your quarters, see what you have.
Okay, before I get to my quarters, I think there are some very interesting matchups before we get to quarterfinals in the let's call it the Sinner bracket. So Sinner is playing Shelton. If Shelton gets through, that's going to be a very interesting matchup in the fourth round that Sinner has to go through, especially the fact that Wimbledon, the grass courts are fast. It really helps someone who can serve big time, and then Shelton has one of the fastest serves in the world. The ball could skid off the surface, he showed a lot during the U.S. Open and even during the French Open. He played well. I mean, Shelton played well. So that's a matchup I'd be very interested to see in the fourth round before Sinner can get to the quarterfinals. Although I have picked Sinner to get to the quarterfinals. And then based on the latest performance of Dimitrov, who played very well on the, I would say, hard courts, I do have like Dimitrov playing against Medvedev, and then I do have Medvedev getting through. And I think going back to, someone like Medvedev, who's really solid in the hard courts, and I debated long and hard before getting him past Dimitrov because of just the fact that it becomes anybody's game. Dimitrov is a good grass court player, and but I'm going to stick with Medvedev in that bracket. And then in the other one, the Carlos bracket, I do have Carlos playing against Rude. That's the one difference that you and I have, because Rude is playing. I have Rude and Tommy Paul playing in the pre-quarterfinals, and Rude is someone who has played really well. I mean, he's not. I mean, I've not seen much on his grass court. And then Tommy Paul, like you said, I mean, great victory recently. And some of these players are pretty much coming in with almost like not much practice on grass. Unlike the clay courts, which have like 6 to 7 tournaments, that Roddick mentioned as well. I mean, you have the Holly, you have the Queens Club, and a couple of others. But other than that, grass is a completely different ball game. But I'm going to go with, although I would like Paul to advance, and I would like to see the Paul and Carlos Alcaraz matchup in the quarterfinals. I'm going to go with Rude there, maybe in 5 sets against Tommy Paul. Um, Going to my other bracket, which I thought was very interesting, you had Korda advancing to the over Rublev,
Mm-hmm.
which means that you have Korda beating Tsitsipas in the third round. I mean, that's
Yeah.
going to be a very interesting matchup. And then I do have Rublev and Tsitsipas actually playing in the fourth round. So I do have Tsitsipas beating Korda. Nothing against Korda, but I do think that Tsitsipas has been playing really well. I mean, if you notice, ever since he moved back into the top 10, he's actually had a very good showing on all surfaces. And I'm going to stick with Rublev and Tsitsipas in the fourth round, with Tsitsipas actually getting the nod to go into the quarterfinals. So I'm actually going a little longer at 2 more rounds than what you have for Tsitsipas. And then in the other one, I do. Fritz has a very interesting matchup in the third round against Tabilo. I mean, Tabilo is some player who's been playing really solid. I mean, I think he had some major wins in the French Open as well. And then I'm going to have the Zverev and Fritz play in the fourth round. But prior to that, I do have Draper from England playing against Zverev. And Draper is someone who actually beat Carlos Alcaraz in
Mm-hmm.
2 straight sets in one of the grass court tune-ups. So I do have Fritz and Zverev playing the fourth round, with Zverev advancing to face Tsitsipas in the quarterfinals. And then in the Djokovic bracket, um, I do have Hercox and Diminor. I mean, obviously, Diminor has to go through FAA to get to that. And then it's going to be a very interesting matchup. Think about this, the potential third round in the Djokovic bracket. You have Rune, Karen Khachanov, Luka Nardi, and Djokovic. And Luka Nardi is someone, as we know, beat Djokovic um, some time back. So I do have the Rune and Djokovic matchup in the pre-quarterfinals, with Diminar playing against Hubie. But I do have Diminar advancing in the quarterfinals against who? Djokovic. So I do have, let me reel out my top 8 here. It's Sinner, Medvedev, Alcaraz, Rude, Tsitsipas, Zverev, Diminar, and Djokovic. So
Mm.
those are my top 8 quarterfinalists for this year's Wimbledon.
Okay. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. We have some differences, mainly on on the Djokovic side of the draw. Mainly,
Mhm.
with we have three. We have Djokovic as the one constant, the one we're in agreement with, and the other three we've kind of disagreed on. So we'll see how that shakes out. Yeah, I mean, I think Tsitsipas, although you like him there, I think he has been playing better this season, but I just don't fully trust him yet on grass. That's not his surface. I think he's obviously he's a clay quarter. No one's going to deny that, and he's plays okay at the Australian Open, which is a slower surface. But we haven't seen much from him on the Wimbledon, I don't think, ever, or the U.S. Open. So advancing too far on faster surfaces. So so yeah, we'll see what happens over there with Tsitsipas, and then Zverev. Zverev Fritz, that could go either way too. So we'll
Yeah.
see how that goes. And
And then
then
going back to Sinner's bracket, we do have one more difference too. You have Paul moving up,
yes,
and I have Rude going to face Alcaraz in the quarterfinals. So
yeah,
um, let's get to the quarterfinals. right now. I mean, let's see who. I mean, we can do our early picks, obviously, and
Okay.
then we can always. I know you're traveling, but I'll be doing a daily recap, and but let's just do it right now, and then
Yes.
there.
So here's how it's going to shake out, in my opinion. So I think we're both going to agree on Sinner. I can't imagine we pick against him, right? I
Right.
think he's probably the betting favorite, the DraftKings favorite. He'll be the plus money will be on him. So I think I have Sinner over Medvedev in relatively easy style. I don't think he'll struggle too much with that as long as his health is okay. I bet Sinner in either 3 or 4 relatively easy sets. And then this is going to shake things up a little bit. I'm going to go with Tommy Paul over Alcaraz. I just think, Paul, having won Queens, has some confidence. I think he wants to really establish himself as the top American going into the U.S. Open. I think, maybe get on a little bit of some momentum going into the hard court season. And I could see him having a good tournament. I mean, he's got a big serve. He's got the ground strokes. I could see him, giving Alcaraz a great match. It's going to be a tall task to beat him, obviously, but I'm going to pick Paul just to kind of shake things up a little bit. So I have Sinner and Paul on this side of the draw, and then on the other side, I'm going to go with I have a Korda Fritz matchup, so I'm going to take Taylor Fritz. So we have 2 Americans now. So I got Taylor Fritz in that semifinal, and then against Djokovic over Hubie. Herkaz. So I'm going to have Fritz, Djokovic, Sinner, Paul. And I'll let you pick yours, and then we can do our finalist picks.
Well, I'm going to stay chalk here. I'm going to go with Sinner and Alcaraz, at least in that half of the bracket. And then slight change here. I mean, you have Fritz and Djokovic, but I
Yeah.
do have Zverev. I think he's coming off I would call it almost like a loss that, must be really hard losing French Open to Alcaraz, an amazing 5-setter. Um, so he's definitely going to bounce back. I mean, he's been playing well. I mean, think about this. He had actually, in the Austrian Open, he was in the semifinals. In the French Open, he was the finalist. So he's one player, apart from Alcaraz, Sinner, and Djokovic, who's actually played really well among the top 4 players. And he's world number 4. So I'm going to stay with Zverev over Tsitsipas in that first matchup. And then, interestingly, I do see Djokovic losing to Diminor because I do have Diminor going for. I don't know. I think I should know better not to bet against this guy. But something tells me that once the games start, I mean, I think it's amazing what he's done. I mean, I think everybody from Roddick to everybody, even Alcaraz. I did listen to an interview from Alcaraz yesterday saying he wasn't too surprised that he's back. He just thought he wouldn't be back. So, but having said that, just talking about there is a lot of movement that he needs to move on the court. One thing about practicing, one thing about hitting ground strokes when you're just practicing and where there's no points at stake here. And the other thing is where when the players start moving him. And I don't know, like there's some very interesting matchups he has. Um, I don't see him, like we said, we've already picked him to go to the quarterfinals, but there's a Nardi matchup and a Rune matchup or a Karen Kachanov matchup that could potentially be a very interesting to Djokovic there. But I do have Diminor moving past for his first semifinal. And then we got Sinner, Alcaraz, Zverev, and Diminor. And now let's turn our page to the who would get to the final and who's going to win it.
Okay, so to make it simple, I have Sinner over Paul. I think Sinner he's just too tough. I think he's gonna, be prove that he's number 1 for a reason right now.
Mhm.
So I think Sinner over Paul. So Sinner reaching his first Wimbledon
Mhm.
final. He's reached obviously he's won the Australian, but this will be his first Wimbledon final that he reaches. And then I have Fritz over Djokovic. Surprisingly, in that semifinal, I think, like you said, I think Djokovic, he is going to kind of meet his match at some point. It's just the physical grind and tear on his body is going to get to be too much at some point on his knee. And I think Fritz is going to, I think Fritz is ready also to prove that he's he wants to be the top American once again. So I got Fritz against Sinner, and then I have Sinner Sinner winning it all at Wimbledon. Yeah.
No, that's a good pick. And this is where I had a very tough time. But I'll start with the easy one with Zverev and Diminor. I do have Zverev moving forward again to go to back-to-back Grand Slam final.
Mhm.
And between Sinner and Alcaraz, um, I'm going to stick with Alcaraz here.
Okay.
Uh, I do think that again, it's anybody's game at that point. When you get to that level, as we talked about, and we had a great matchup that we saw in the French Open. Um, so I do have Alcaraz, and you could see where I'm trending right now to where I'm trending in terms of who's going to win it all. So I do have Alcaraz playing against Zverev again. It's a repeat
You
match,
have a rematch. You have a rematch with the French, huh?
rematch of the French, and they
Wow.
actually played each other in the Australian Open too, where Zverev actually beat
That's right.
Alcaraz.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
we're going trifecta,
Rubber match.
and I would like to see if Zverev can
Huh.
get the revenge back at Alcaraz, but I do see Alcaraz going back to back Wimbledon titles, and then you have Sinner winning it all. Looks like it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I think that's a good pick, actually. Alcaraz, Zverev. I mean, Alcaraz is, yeah, he's playing so well now. Ever since that injury, he's come back stronger than ever. He's played great the last year. His serve is just phenomenal. It's over 70% for a serve percentage, and he serves it as hard as anyone, up in the 140s. He can dial it up. So be hard to break him on the grass courts. Probably be a lot of tiebreakers potentially in that match,
Mhm.
if that is the matchup in the final. So all right, so you have Alcaraz Zverev with Carlos winning his fourth Grand Slam, right? That'll be Carlos's fourth, and
Correct.
I have Sinner over
For a
Fritz.
second.
Sinner's second, and yeah, his first Wimbledon potentially. So, yeah, so we'll see.
We'll see. I mean, now one thing that could be really, which would throw a wrench into all our picks here, is if Djokovic goes and wins it all. Um, and I think that's going to be just incredible. I mean, if Djokovic indeed does go and win Wimbledon, um, that puts him definitely. I mean, that you have to give it to him. I mean, that could be one of the greatest runs. I mean, I know Federer came back from an injury on the Australian Open, but for Djokovic to come back, I don't know how major the injury was, but whatever is said and done, he still had surgery on his knee, and for him to come back and win it all, that would be impressive. So let's look at some of the dark horses. I mean, we always do that, um, and I know what my dark horse is going to be, but I wanted to hear your dark horse for the Wimbledon.
See here. I don't really give too much thought to dark horses, but let's see here. I mean, I don't know how we define a dark horse anymore. Like, is it someone outside the top 20? How we doing things these days for dark horses?
Well,
Let's
how
see.
about this? Anyone who has not won a major.
Oh, okay. Let's see here. Well, in that case, maybe like someone like a Herkaj, maybe, he's good on grass. He's, reached a couple quarters. I don't think he's got to a semifinal yet. I like his chances. I mean, obviously I have Tommy Paul going pretty far, so I'm not going to really call him much of a dark horse. He just came off of a win in the grass court season. He hasn't won a major yet. So let's see who else I'm looking at here. Um, Maybe someone like a Ben Shelton. You already kind of mentioned him though with his big serve on grass, maybe making a little bit of noise. It's interesting though. Apparently he hasn't had a great grass court season, although it's short. He hasn't played well in his last few matches. And in the Serve podcast, they were making a big deal about the American. This is a real dark horse, but Alex Mickelson. I haven't really watched him too much, but apparently he's someone to look out for. And they're picking Mickelson over Shelton early on in this. I think for Mickelson to get to maybe the third round. So yeah, if I had to pick two dark horses, I guess I would go with maybe like a Herkaj and then Demon Hour. I think he's top 10 player now. He hasn't reached a final yet, but that would be my two dark horses: Herkaj and maybe a Demon Hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's something that you talked about Mickelson. I think he does play Shelton in the second round. That's going to be interesting. Uh,
Yeah.
for my dark horse, someone who's not won a championship, and I'm going to stay with this. I think this was my French Open dark horse, and that was actually Taylor Fritz. Was one of my dark horses too. Will be the one. The other one could be Rude, in my opinion. Someone who's been to what, three Grand Slam finals, lost once to
I think Carlos at the U.S. Open,
Nadal.
right?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, he wants. I mean, the three Grand Slam losses he's had. I think definitely one was Nadal in the French Open.
And Djokovic at the French also, I think.
Go
Yeah.
to the French, and then he lost one to Alcaraz.
Yeah, at the U.S.
So
Open. Yeah.
yeah, nothing wrong in losing to these three guys, but
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
you were there, you were knocking on the door. So someone I would like to definitely like to see him win. Uh, but I think that's where we are right now, and I do have one trivia question for you because we always like to do a trivia.
Yes.
Who holds the record for the most Wimbledon singles titles?
I was just thinking about that right before we brought that up. God, I thought Federer and Djokovic were tied at maybe 7.
So
Or
maybe I should rephrase this question. I did say who from the men's bracket holds the record for most singles titles. So this could be anybody from the women's bracket too. So that's the trivia question.
anyone? I mean, men's or women's all-time players?
Yes, that's why I said I'd rephrase the question now.
Oh, all time. Gosh, all time. So somebody had Martina. I still would go with God. I thought said Djokovic from last year. No, I think it's still Federer at 7, isn't it? Federer
8. Federer's got 8.
Federer and Djokovic has what, 7?
7.
And so Federer holds the all-time record, or is there a lady you're saying who's broken that record?
So here I'll give you a hint.
Martina?
Yes, Martina. There you go.
Really?
Yeah.
I was thinking back. I think Martina has more than 8. She has what, 9 maybe?
9. Yes, and
Oh
Djokovic.
my God! Wow.
And then Federer has
8,
8. Yes.
and Djokovic 7. You're saying okay?
Yeah, I think 7. Yes, because he would have won the 8th one if he had beaten Alcaraz and last year, which went to an amazing 5-setter. So that's one of the trivia questions for you, which I thought was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that is. No, because I started watching the Federer documentary, and I think when Federer knocked off Sampras, did you watch the documentary?
Yes, I did.
Federer knocked off Sampras early on in his career when Sampras was the the all-time champion, and Sampras had won, I think, 7. Borg, I think, called him to I think thank him for for not allowing Sampras to win another title, and I think eclipsed Borg as the all-time winner. So so Sampras must have 7. I'm guessing 7 Wimbledons, 6 or 7. So good question.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, like we end always with that trivia question because I know our good buddies Pete Suttmeyer likes questions. He gets a call out, and then we'll give a shout out to Andy Woolner. We never give him a shout out for someone who's created our music, and he's going to come up with this new podcast audio sometime soon. We'll see. But I think this is great. I know you'll be traveling for most part, hopefully safe, and I'll be doing the recaps of. I think the good news is that both Sinner and Alcaraz are actually on tap tomorrow morning for day one. So we'll get to see how Alcaraz is rebounded after his loss on the grass court, and then how Sinner is going to be charged up after his loss in the French Open. So it'll be interesting to see, and then you'll get some early glimpses of where the trend is going. But for now, you got Sinner, I got Alcaraz. So that's how we end it, and then we'll see how it goes. And thank you, Dan. Just hang on a bit while I end the recording. Good night.
Yeah. Good night, everyone.
Thank you for listening. Primo will be back soon.